Thank you, Alex. And good evening, everyone who's joining, and welcome. I see some very familiar names in the attendee list, and I'm glad to see you all. I do want to tell you also that when you purchase your copy of We Are the Light from Skylark, we do have signed book plates for you. So please do get your copy from Skylark. You'll get a signed book plate. This will make a spectacular gift, I promise. So tonight we have Matthew Quick. Matthew is the New York Times best-selling author of the Silver Linings Playbook, which was made into an Oscar-winning film, and 8 other novels, including We Are the Light, a #1 Indie Next Pick and Book of the Month selection. His work has been translated into more than 30 languages, received a PEN Hemingway Award honorable mention, was an LA Times Book Prize finalist, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, a #1 bestseller in Brazil, a German Youth Literature Prize 2016 nominee, and selected by Nancy Pearl as one of the summer's best books for NPR. The Hollywood Reporter has named him one of Hollywood's 25 most powerful authors. Matthew lives with his wife, the novelist Alicia Bissett, on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Matthew, welcome tonight. I'm so thrilled to finally get the chance to talk to you about this book. And I thought we could start by you just telling everybody a little bit about We Are the Light.
Wow. So thanks for having me, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. We Are the Light is a book about love. And the protagonist is named Lucas Goodgame, and he's a high school counselor. And at the beginning of the novel, he suffers this unimaginable tragedy. And when he comes out of this tragedy, the first thing that happens is his Jungian analyst abandons him, basically on page 1. And he's bereft and he doesn't know what to do. And so he decides that he's going to write letters to his Jungian analyst in an attempt to woo his analyst back. And as we read these letters, we really get to see just how broken Lucas is, but also how resilient his psyche is, and how it crafts this beautiful narrative to keep him from fracturing. And as he goes forward through the plot, a young man by the name of Eli, whom he was counseling at the school, shows up in his backyard and puts up a tent and basically won't leave and forces this relationship with Lucas. And he decides that he is going to not only help Eli graduate from high school, but also initiate him into manhood. He's going to take this broken boy and see that he gets through this awful time. And they decide that they're going to create this art project that they imagine will not only heal themselves, but the entire town. And we get to see how the town really comes together and rallies in this really beautiful way to overcome tragedy and overcome the unimaginable in this really heartwarming and unlikely way.
I loved this book so much. And as I was looking through it again in the past week or so, coming up with my questions, I was struggling because I kept just losing myself in the pages again, where I'd open it to just a section and think, all right, what question do I want to pull out of this? And I would just find myself pages later wandering in my own mind again. And that is the effect that this book has on me, and I know on so many other readers. In the early galley that I got, I was so lucky to be sent a very early copy of this book. You have a personal note to the booksellers that talks about your journey to this book. And reading that note, I was just compelled to follow you on the journey and then read the book. I mean, I couldn't wait to see where that journey took you. Can you talk a little bit about that journey for you and why you felt compelled to tell the booksellers and librarians who'd be getting early copies about your struggles writing it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I guess I should say, I guess I should be honest. And the reason why I wrote that was because my publishers asked me to write to write an introduction. And I thought about it, and what's to write? Why did I come up with this book? What did I want to say to people? And I'd been on this journey. I published my last novel, The Reason You're Alive, in 2017. And shortly after that, I decided to get 100% sober. I had been flirting with sobriety for a while, but I went all in, and I wasn't prepared for the amount of emotions that would kind of rush to the surface when I stopped numbing myself with alcohol. And my big reward for writer's block, my big reward for getting sobriety for sobriety was writer's block. And I had always dealt with my anxiety and depression through alcohol and writing. And then suddenly both of those things were off the table. And when I say I had writer's block, it wasn't just, I used to not believe in writer's block, but I would go into a room every single day for 8 hours and struggle to write a sentence. I would routinely, usually when I'm writing well, write 3,000, 4,000 words a day. And suddenly I couldn't write 10. And that went on for years. And I used to tell people when I was a big drinker early in my writing career that I never trusted writers who didn't drink. And then I became a writer who didn't drink. And I had a hard time trusting myself sober. And it took me, I lone wolfed it. I tried to use ego to defeat the problem. I thought I can overcome this if I just keep sitting down at my desk every day. And I did that for years. And sometimes I would get to the end of a year and I'd have 10 pages and I would ask my wife, Alicia, who's a novelist, to read them. And they would upset her. She would be really upset because they were so bad and she didn't know what to say to me. So it was like I couldn't write. And what I thought I was going to defeat with ego, it turned out that I had to submit to this process. And once my ego was completely defeated, I entered into Jungian analysis. And since I published Silver Linings in 2008, I've been talking about the importance of mental health awareness and telling people that if you have a problem, reach out, get help. There's no stigma. But my dirty little secret was that I was not reaching out and getting the help that I needed. I was drinking. And that worked for a long time, until it didn't. And it was this really humbling moment when I had to reach out and get help. And when I entered into Jungian analysis, I did so because I thought, well, I'm just going to do this so I can write again. That was my conscious goal. I told my analyst, get me writing again. That's all that matters. And of course, Psyche had other plans. And, what we ended up doing was dealing with 46 years of pain that had nothing to do with my writing career at all. And so early on in that process, I bonded with my analyst in this really intense way. And I got really paranoid that he would disappear. And I think part of me felt, oh, this is working. Like somebody really cares about me. Someone's showing up. I can see that this is something I'm starting to trust. This is a relationship that I feel is really beneficial for me. So the dark part of me said, oh, of course, that'll be taken away. Of course, that's not going to last. I just had a really hard time trusting. And I started to get paranoid that my analyst would die, or, I would say the wrong thing in analysis and he would, decide he didn't want to work with me anymore. And so like I always do with my mental health problems, I took it to the creative writing wrestling ring and, just started to wrestle it down on the page. And the novel, We Are the Light, is not about sobriety, but it is about trauma and pain and somebody fracturing and having to deal with a tremendous amount of pain. So symbolically and thematically, it really echoes what I was going through. And so it was important for me for a lot of reasons to tell that story, because I think a lot of people wondered where I went, and a lot of people were asking, where have you been? And I feel in my early sobriety, I had to hide, and I had lived this very hermit-like existence, and I had to be very selfish. And I thought people needed an explanation, but I also wanted people to know that the transformation from early sobriety to this really awful time period to working professional is possible. And it took me a long time to make that journey, years, and it's still going on. But I really wanted to let people know that, in the darkness, there's light. That's what the book is about. It's about finding light. And so I wanted to let people know that I had come to these themes and these ideas honestly.
Yes. And I have to give a plug to your newsletter as well, because I realize that every writer, almost every writer, their publishers are telling them, you need to do a newsletter. You've got to start a newsletter. You've got to, keep engaging with your readers and reaching new people. You call yours your monthly personal newsletter, and it is personal. I mean, you just lay everything out, and it's the one newsletter that when I see it come through, I'm like, I got to see what Matthew's doing. I got to see where he is. I got to see what's going on. I love your newsletter. So
thank you.
I highly recommend to anybody watching to go to MatthewQuickWriter.com and sign up for his monthly newsletter. It's a joy to get in my inbox.
And it's free.
And it's free. And it's something you can depend on.
Thank you.
And so you touched on it already. This book is written as a series of letters. Can you talk about, is that how you set out to write this book? Was that the first thing that came to you? I'm going to do it as a series of letters, or did you kind of have an outline of where you wanted the story and that's how it fell in? And what's special about this structure for a book?
Well, I'll start by saying I absolutely did not want to write this book in letters. Ego did not want to do another epistolary novel. I had done that with The Good Luck of Right Now, and it was, I don't like to repeat myself, and I felt not everybody likes that structure. It felt risky to me. I just didn't want to do it. My wife was the first one to suggest that I write another novel in letters, and I was blocked. And she said, well, you can't write fiction, but you write letters to people. And I do. I love writing letters to my friends, and I have email pen pals. And I've always, since I was a teenager, have been corresponding through letters with someone. And some of those relationships have gone on for decades. And I really enjoy writing letters. I enjoy the intimacy of it. And so she said, why don't you just write a book in letters? And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And years went by, and she kept telling me, you should try, just try. And then Nick Butler, the writer Nick Butler, he had no idea, Alicia had suggested that, but we had exchanged some letters. And, he said, dude, why, you can write letters. Why don't you try to write a book in letters? And it was like, because he echoed that without having talked to Alicia, I was like, oh, maybe I should try it. And then when I finally, sat down and wrote the words, Dear Karl, it was like a magic spell was broken. And I just was off. It was like, whoosh, and I started writing 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and I just couldn't stop. And so, I like to say that the format of the book, I didn't choose the format of the book. The format of the book chose me. And I am an intuitive creative. So, there's that old chestnut about, pantsers and plotters, right? And Alicia is very much a plotter. She maps out her story arc. She knows all of her characters. She puts stickies all over the wall. Like, she knows exactly how the story is going to unfold. I am a pantser. I sit down, and my process is I listen for a voice. And when I hear a voice, I start to ask questions like, who is this person? What do they want? What do they love? What do they hate? What are they not telling me? What don't they know about themselves? And it's a process. It's like if you meet someone for the first time or you go on a date and you sit down with them, they're not going to tell you their deepest, darkest. So I have a conversation with this person on the page until I know their psychology. And then once I have that voice down, I just allow that voice to guide me. And it almost, when it works well, and it usually doesn't work well, but when it does work well, when it's actually going, it can almost feel like channeling to me. And I'm very surprised where it goes. And when that happens, it is absolutely wonderful. And I'll just write for weeks and go, 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 go. Once I lock onto a voice, it's not very hard for me to finish a manuscript. But I've been trying to find the voice for this book since 2014. And so it was, a 7-year process of finding the voice and false starts and starting over again. And I tried to outline, I tried to do a story arc. That just doesn't work for me because I'm just intuitive. So that's just the way that I work. I wish I could be a plotter sometimes, because when you're stuck, it would be easy to plot and, do research. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I am very much a pantser, so I get that completely. I respect and admire, and I'm a little jealous of people who can lay a book out. I write, and when the words are coming, they're there. So, I look at Silver Linings Playbook and I look at We Are the Light, which are completely different books, but each one has a troubled, broken man and a woman. And I am an emotional reader, not a technical reader. So I'm going by, the feelings that were brought up as I read. But these women in both books, they aren't looking to fix the guy. I'm going to take him and clean him up and fix him up. They seem to be more allowing and enabling and helping them to heal, which to me is a unique and wonderful way to write and story for me to read. Can you talk about, why it's important to you to show men that are vulnerable, that are broken, that are open with their struggles, that it comes through so beautifully on the page?
Well, thank you for that. We hear a lot today about toxic masculinity, and that's a real thing. We need to have that conversation. Toxic masculinity is not good, obviously. And, we're trying to fix a lot of wrongs from the past. Again, we need to do that. But sometimes I struggle with the fact that we hear the words toxic masculinity all the time, but how often do we hear the words positive masculinity? And I think we send a message to young men constantly about who they shouldn't be. But how often do we tell them who they should be? How often do we give them examples of how they can interact in the world and create something and create relationships that are beneficial to everyone, that they'll be rewarded for? And I think that my characters, Pat, who I wrote as a young man, Pat Peoples, in Silver Linings Playbook, I was far less conscious of this, but I think I had a yearning and a kind of intuitive understanding about how the culture was changing. Lucas Goodgame and We Are the Light, it was a very conscious decision. Lucas has a very complicated relationship with his mother. He has a very complicated relationship to the feminine, but he meets this young woman when he's in college, Darcy, and she heals that wound very beautifully. And when Darcy is taken away from him, that wound is ripped open again. And he elevates his deceased wife to the role of the divine feminine. She visits him as an angel. And psychologically, he's asking for permission. He's asking what to do. And one of the things that Darcy says to him over and over and over again is the boy is the way forward, meaning this broken boy in the backyard, like, take care of him, love him, heal him, use your masculinity in this positive way. And we see the men in the book really taking care of Lucas and the women as well. But he has these great relationships, especially with this character, Isaiah, who is the principal of the school, who not only, he's a religious guy, so he prays for Lucas, but he hugs him. He rests his forehead against him. He takes care of him. He loves Lucas. And I think that that's something that men are looking for, particularly in my generation, men who grew up in the 80s and 70s, who were not hugged, did not hear "I love you" from their fathers, and really struggled with, what is positive masculinity? I grew up in a time where there wasn't a lot of examples of that around. And so I write these characters because we need that. There's two boys in the book, they're brothers, Eli and Jacob. Jacob shoots people, Eli shoots movies. Why does one brother shoot people and the other brother shoots movies? Well, I would venture a guess to say that one of the brothers was loved by men in the community and taken care of and shown how to be a man, and the other brother was not. And so I think, as we look what's happening to young men these days, it's important to say that that's not good and we need to clean up toxic masculinity. But I think we also have to look in the mirror and say, what are we not giving these young men? Why are they turning to violence? Why are they so fractured? Why are they broken? Who is failing to love these young men? And what is the message that we're giving? How are they ending up thinking that the world is so bleak and so devoid of hope that they're doing these awful things? Somebody failed them at some point. And so I think, the book is an antidote to that. Lucas and Isaiah and the men in the town, the other men in the town, they rally, and the women too. The women, there's a lot of really positive women, but we're talking about masculinity right now. They really rally around this young broken boy and make sure that he's going to have a future that's different than his brothers. And that is accomplished with love.
Yes, so beautifully said, all of it. And you, of course, were talking about one of the sections that I had turned to, and it's like, oh, what question do I want to pull? And I just found myself pages later, right back into the story again. And you talk about, I just want to read, Eli Lucas, an early paragraph that stood out to me so much. Sometimes walking helps me, I said. Do you want to take a walk with me? He nodded, and then we walked all day long. I bet we walked at least 18 miles, hardly saying a word to each other. But having the boy next to me on the journey seemed to help a great deal. And as the day went on, I began to feel certain that he also found my being next to him just as helpful, if not more so. And so we kept walking, getting stronger together. Our trust in the Eli Lucas link increased as we continued to use it. I just felt like that so perfectly encapsulates what you just said about this, this connection that, if we can just, if one person can show us another way, and if there's one person that takes an interest in us, that can change things. That can change everything. In school, I had a troubled home life, and I had a group of teachers that kind of collected a bunch of us kids that were struggling and could have gone one direction, and they gave us positive attention. They gave us, they took us rafting, whitewater rafting, and just showed us that somebody cared. And that is what I saw over and over in this book that came through so strongly, was that having one person who cared. Who is that person for you that has showed you that being sensitive, being vulnerable, being open with your mental health is okay?
I wouldn't say there's one person. I've been blessed to see there's many people, and even I think because of my depression and my anxiety, a lot of times in the moment in the past, I didn't see those people. I didn't appreciate those people, but they were there. And I remember, as a young man, my grandfather, I tell the story all the time, but I used to have breakfast with him before school, and he was a religious man, so he would pray and he would hold my hand, and he'd ask his God, look over this boy today, help him out. And at the time, I feel like that was life-saving for me. It wasn't even the religious aspect that I was a religious person back then, but it was more just that there was an older man that cared about how I was doing that day, and a time when I felt alone. And, when I was a young teacher, there were older men in the building in all of the schools that I worked in, that looked out for me, that saw I was young and I was hopeful and vulnerable, and I hadn't yet been crushed by the school system. And I think they fell in love with me a little bit, and also tried to protect me from the ugliness of the system. I tell a story that my friend John, when I was a teacher, I had gotten up the courage to tell him I wanted to be a writer. And John he was my father's age. And I remember going to my cubby one day and finding a Pat Conroy book. And I opened it up and it said in there something like, "To the next Pat Conroy, like enjoy." And, at the time now, it seems like heartwarming, just kind of a funny joke or story. But, to a 28-year-old kid who had this dream of being a novelist and didn't think anybody believed in him and doubted that maybe he could do that, that was a really powerful gift to give me. And so my wife too, my wife has been with me since I was 19, and she's been through it all. She's seen every ugly aspect of my personality, and she has not turned away yet. And so that is also an amazing gift. And, now in my life, I have some really great guy friends, and, I'm blessed to have a few writing friends and, professional contacts that have stood by me through my dark period. And so there's a lot. I would say too that, when I got initially sober and I got depressed, I had a hard time feeling that I deserved love. And it was tough for me to accept that there were people out there that wanted to love me at the time. And so I've really had to fight through my sobriety to give up those defenses, because I think love terrified me. And so I thought, oh, no one will love me. But then once you kind of let go of that defense and do the inner work, you start to see there's a lot of people out there who want to love you. And this book tour has been mind-blowingly beautiful that way. The people that have come out and said nice things and, come through the signing line and giving me small tokens, and you realize it wasn't the world, it was me. I was the one that was blocking the light and the love. And I think that is something that Lucas in the book really struggles with too, because he's thrust into this role where he has to do something that he's not ready to do for the good of others, and it shatters him. And because of his past trauma, he doesn't think he's worthy of love, and so he can't let it in until this community finds a way to prove to him that he is worthy of love. And I think, the message of We Are the Light is that we're all worthy of love. We're all worthy of receiving and giving love. And I think that's maybe why some people have had such a strong reaction to the book, because I don't think that's a message that we hear a lot in today's society. We hear a lot, some people are worthy of love, but not those people, and I think the book is this kind of radical form of love that say, oh yeah, those people too, all those people that you don't like, they're worthy of love too. Everybody is worthy of love. We have when I moved down south, I kept hearing this saying, y'all means all, and it's a beautiful saying. And a lot of people that say it mean, include certain marginalized people, which is great. We should do that. But we also have to include the people that voted for the other person that you don't like. It's everybody. Y'all means all, and everybody deserves love. Not that those discussions of power and politics don't have their place. They're important. But I think we lose sight of that sometimes in this kind of new polarized, super political world. We forget that we all want the same thing deep down. We want respect, we want love, we want to be able to have positive interactions with other people. And
Yes,
I think that's something that's worth pondering these days.
agreed. I look at both Lucas and Eli and how easy it would be to turn Eli into a pariah or a villain by association.
Yeah.
And how, in today's world, how many siblings and family members of a shooter, are ostracized then from
Scapegoated.
society. And
Yeah.
and yet Lucas, he takes Eli under his wing, and so they're healing each other because Lucas did this, this what could be seen as a heroic thing, but he's traumatized, and it's also hard, I think, for society to see somebody in so much pain for so long. It's very easy to, I was brought up, get over it, suck it up, figure it out, pull yourself up, move on. And so to know that they're hanging in there for each other. And the other one that really does that for Lucas is Jill, another, positive. Did you always know there was going to be a Jill in the story, or did Jill kind of evolve as you were writing?
Jill was there from the beginning. And, the interesting thing about her was how she seemed to be the opposite of Darcy. They had this great friendship because they're the opposites.
Yeah.
But they're almost, Lucas, Jill, and Darcy are almost like this throuple. Like they're this couple that goes, there's a three-way couple that just kind of works. And then once Darcy is gone, Jill has to kind of do the work of two parts of that triangle. And it gets confusing because she's always loved Lucas and she's always loved Darcy, but she now misses Darcy terrible, and she only has Lucas. And so what does that mean? And it gets complicated. And so I liked playing with that tension. And also, Lucas elevates his deceased wife to this position of the divine feminine. And so Jill is the way for him to reorient to the feminine in this real world, which is the task that he psychologically needs to do. So I don't know that I had it all mapped out, but my intuition was that she had to be there.
Yeah. And then I also would like to know, how did We Are the Light evolve from first draft to finished copy? Were there any major changes, or did you, after all of the time that it took you to get your start with this book, once you started, is the finished copy kind of what you started with?
Well, the drafts from 2014 to this spring of 2021 look nothing like the finished copy. Radically different, and there were many of them. But when I started writing, I think it was the beginning of August or late July 2021, that kind of 6-week period where I had the, like it just started coming. The book looks remarkably like what came out. My wife did a lot of line editing, but when my editor, Jofi Ferrari Adler at Avid Reader Press, bought the book, one of the things that was wonderful and made me want to go with him is that he really got the book in a really, it moved him greatly. And when we had our conversation, I knew that he understood what I was trying to do, and he was 100% an ally in the message of the book. But the other thing that was really great is he said, I think it's pretty much ready to go. Like, it's things like a light edit, and that's always wonderful to hear. And so, I think after all of those years of thinking about it and all the analysis that I did, I think I was ready to write this book, and it came out the right way when it was supposed to.
I can't agree more. Absolutely. And one final question from me, and then I'll remind people watching that if you have a question, go ahead and pop it into the Q&A. There are so many wonderful supporting characters in this book. So many. Did you start out with all of those? Or did some of them come to you as you were moving along? Because I mean, they're really all of these additional people, and you've talked about, so many of them, they're all so beautifully well-rounded, and just the way they all fit together is amazing, just amazing. Some books, they introduce all these characters and I'll find myself reading and I'll be like, wait, who was that one again? Yours they become like friends. I feel like I'm in this small town and I know these people and I could pick them out if I crossed paths with them on the streets. So were they all there in the beginning, or did some of them come to you as you were moving along?
Yeah, I have to think. My book is in another head. I mean, my head is another book now. So I'm trying to think back of the process. And, I think the major characters were there, Lucas and Jill and Darcy and Karl and Bess and Isaiah and Bobby the cop were kind of there. And then the world, I think, started to expand as I went out further. And Robin and Jesus and all these other characters started to kind of populate the town, because in the beginning, Lucas is kind of by himself and, he's withdrawn from the survivors group. And then as he starts to get healthy, we start to meet everybody, because he's going out. So again, being a creative, intuitive creative, I'm not doing like my wife does when she's putting all the names on the wall and doing character sketches. It's just, I don't know, these people just kind of come to me as I go along. So it's, it's kind of hard to explain. So I didn't have everyone fleshed out at the beginning, but maybe there was some part of me that just knew where it was going.
Well, you hinted at something, so I do have to ask, are you working on anything now that you can share, or is it early stages?
I just finished the rough draft of my next novel, and I'm really excited about it, but no one has read it besides me. So it's in this kind of heady place where, I'm madly in love with it, but I haven't put it through the tests. Alicia will read it first, and then if it gets past her, we'll edit, and then it will go to my editor, and my agent, and he'll read, and then my editor. So one of my rewards for finishing a book as an introvert is that I set aside a couple weeks where it just gets to be mine, because a book for me is something that lives inside of me. And then the wonderful but somewhat painful process for me as an introvert is to extrovert that, not only just into the computer and onto the page, but to allow people access to this inner dream that I had that is so personal and so private. And letting go of that is difficult, because once everybody edits it and reads it, it's no longer living inside of me anymore. And there's a little bit of a painful letting go there. When I was a young writer, I'd write something and I just want everyone to read it right away, because I was so excited. Now, when I go through a creative process, there's almost, I don't think it's a selfishness. I think there's a little bit of a mourning period of, letting it go and giving it away, and I don't know, I imagine it's like when my friends' kids go off to college, it's happy, but that kind of like empty nest syndrome where you're sad and, what do I do now that it's gone? Mm-hmm. So I'm still in the happy phase of I did this and it's mine, but I think it's really good. And I am hopeful for it.
Well, I am hopeful that your wife gives it her okay and that we will eventually get to see it.
Well, I'll send you an ARC when we get to that time. You're on the ARC list for sure.
Can't wait. We do have a question from Christina,
Sure.
who is a wonderful, special unicorn of a human. She says, what advice do you have for someone beginning their mental health journey Have any books influenced or helped you with your journey, whether fiction or nonfiction?
Wow. Well, I'll tackle the first part. I think the best advice, well, I won't say the best advice. The advice that's coming to me now in the moment is find people who have your best interest at heart, that you can trust, and then listen to them. You know, I think sometimes as we start to work on our mental health, one of the most difficult things to do is to realize that we're not seeing things clearly. And I went through this. I thought, I'm a very intuitive person. I'm a very introspective person. And I thought I knew myself really, really well after 46 years of living and writing and journaling. And, you know, when I entered into analysis, I realized I didn't know myself at all. And that was a very painful awakening and a realization. And I think having the humility to say, I might not know everything, and other people might see things that I don't see, is hard at the beginning. And it gets a lot easier if you're working with professionals who have your best interests at heart, and if you have friends and family that are supporting you through the journey and are holding you accountable. And so I think it's really important to realize that we heal through relationship. We heal through relationship with other people, particularly for me, my relationship with my analyst was essential. It was essential for the healing. So, you know, to realize that, you know, we're pack animals. Like we're not meant to lone wolf it. And I lone wolf it for years. And, you know, I thought I could do it that way, and I couldn't. Books, it's weird because they're so personal. Like there's so many novels that have helped me that I don't know that they'd be useful to other people. Like Gao Xingjian's Soul Mountain, like really was an important book for me. There's a book called The Courage to Be Disliked. It was like about Adlerian theory. There's so many books on Jung. I've been reading dozens and dozens of them. But I would also say too that I kind of fell into, for most of my life, I'm going to read a book and I'll be okay. I'll find the right book and that will make me okay. But I don't know that a book can make you okay. As much as I love books and I think books are great, I think it's the relationships that heal you. I think it's being in union with other people, and particularly, again, with my analyst, somebody professional that I have a relationship with now that's been so healing for me. My relationship with my wife has been really essential. You know, some of these new relationships in sobriety that I have with other men, where we talk and hold each other accountable, and they're people that show up for me on a regular basis, and I know that they're going to be honest, and they're going to praise me when they see me doing great things, and they're going to call me out when, I'm not doing great things. So that was a lot, but that's what comes to mind right now. And again, that's for me. I don't know you. So I think the other bit of advice too is that to know everybody's path is different, and you've got to find the things and the people and the methods that work for you.
Absolutely. Yours and my paths too, and in sobriety are very different, but there are so many of the same components. That everything you're talking about resonates with me, and I agree completely. I spent a lot of years looking at self-help books, and the answer is not to be found there. We have one more question from Cindy, and that is, what type of therapy did you use? And I think I know you touched on this to some extent. Maybe explain a little bit about Jungian therapy, which
Sure.
I believe is what you've used.
Yeah, so I'm in Jungian analysis. I still am. And, a lot of people have been asking me for an overview of Jungian analysis. And it's so complex, and there's so many books, and there's this Jung was such a genius. So I will tell you, as I see it, this is the Matthew Quick overview, and I'm sure smarter and wiser people can give you a better answer. But to me, what I've learned is Jungian analysis really is a deep dive into not only who you are, but who you are meant to be, who you were born into this world to become. Jung called this process individuation, and it is not something that you acquire overnight. It's kind of like if you're a Buddhist and you're trying to obtain enlightenment, it's a destination. It's a goal. It's not something that you do in 5 minutes. And I remember very early on in my analysis, my analyst, I was angry because he hadn't fixed me in 3 weeks, and when am I going to write? When am I going to write? And I remember him saying, well, it's interesting. You think you could do this in 3 weeks? Because when he was in analysis, he said, it took me, 20 years of analysis to figure this out. And so it's not a quick fix. It is something that breaks you down and then builds you back up. And so if you're looking for relief from your symptoms, this is not the place. This is a place where you go into the pain, you go into the darkness, and then you figure out who you are. And very slowly you start to acclimate to the truth. So one of the things we do in Jungian analysis is all of those things that we're angry about out in the world, all of that, like you people over there and those people over there, like we say, no, like here's a mirror, because it's you, like you're the one that is the problem, and you're the one that is projecting all of this into the world. And so that is not the current narrative out there. I think Jungian analysis runs very counter to the current narrative, and it's humbling, and it's been a place where you take a hard look in the mirror and you get really, really honest about what's going on. It's also, Jungian analysis is also interested in the unconscious as well. So, ego and what we see, what we think we know, like that is consciousness. But, most of what's going on inside of us that's controlling us, we're not aware of. And so it's a look at getting in touch with the unconscious, all the things that we don't see about ourselves. We use dream analysis to do this, active imagination. And so for a writer, it's very attractive. Also, the idea of story being medicine, fairy tales, myth, like we study that for psychological medicine, which is very attractive to me as a storyteller. So, my analyst is constantly telling me stories about myths and fairy tales and truths that always were, that have been preserved through the ages because people wrote them down as stories. And the stories were meant to heal us. And so that is also kind of a radical idea in these days. So, and Jung himself said Jungian analysis is not for everyone. He very famously would refuse to take a lot of people on because he didn't think they were strong enough or ready enough for that. But for me, it's been really transformative and really helpful. But I will say, if you go into Freudian therapy or you do cognitive behavior therapy, or all of those things are just as valid. I think that you have to find the thing that works for you. This is what works for me.
And I think that is a perfect way for us to wrap it up, in that if you want to know a little more about Jungian therapy, if you read We Are the Light, you will be given kind of an insider's tour to Jungian therapy. And it is a healing book. It is such a healing book, both internally and externally. And again, please purchase a copy from Skylark. You will get a lovely book plate to put inside it, and it will make a wonderful, wonderful gift as well. Any of you that follow me on social media know I have been posting about this book like a crazy lady because I love it so much. I really do. And Matthew, this conversation has been everything and more. I'm just so appreciative that you took the time to hang out with us tonight. And thank you for writing this book, and keep doing what you are, and being who you are. And thanks to everybody who's joined us tonight.
Yeah,
Have a
thank you
great
so much,
night,
Mary.
folks.
Appreciate it. It means a lot to me.